Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our weekly immigration news recap, where we break down what changed in U.S. immigration this week and what signals came from the Trump administration that could impact your immigration case if you're a foreign national, or your client strategy if you're an immigration practitioner. Today is Thursday, July 17th. It's about 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this episode is going to be released tomorrow, Friday morning on the 18th. To recap the news with me today, I'm really lucky to be joined by an actual reporter, Andrew Kreighbaum, immigration reporter at Bloomberg Law, and not just any reporter, the very well-deserved winner of AILA's 2025 Media Leadership Award. So, Andrew, first, congrats on that. I haven't had the chance to tell you that yet. And second, thanks so much for making the time to recap the news with me this week. How's everything going?
Yeah, appreciate it. It's great to be here. It's been busy as always, and as I'm sure a lot of it's been for a lot of your listeners as well.
I joked I was texting with one of the managing partners at one of the big employment-based immigration law firms today, because she was apologizing for not getting back to me about something, and I was like, "Don't worry, like it feels like summer is canceled if you work in immigration during a Trump administration." I think that's certainly been true this year.
Yeah, yeah, you could say that.
I asked you this about 2, 3 months ago when we had you on our immigration insiders meeting, but now that we're 6 months into the Trump administration, what's it been like covering this administration? Has it been any different than last time? And then kind of the question I'm really curious about, I think a lot of the immigration attorneys who who get inundated with the noise of immigration news, would probably want to ask you as well, is how do you decide which stories to cover in general, which to put on the back burner, and then which to look at in more depth when it's so busy in the news?
Yeah, so now that we're about 6 months in, it feels like we can do some assessment of how things have played out so far, but there's still a lot. A lot of changes that were expected, a lot of issues folks expected them to address that haven't really come up yet, whether it's
Mm.
um, regulating H-1Bs, for example, or you know, a real um, a real big rollout of worksite raids. Hasn't really happened so far, but a lot of the big stories that have played out haven't necessarily been the things that um, folks in the immigration world might have anticipated, but have still been pretty significant when you talk about, for example, the whole issue with the student visa revocation and ICE going in and deleting all these records from the SEVIS database. I don't know. I don't think I spoke to anyone in January who was predicting anything like that. So it's really kept us, reporters on our toes, and I'm sure immigration attorneys as well. So yeah, we try to anticipate just based on Trump won and some of the breadcrumbs we've seen so far, big stories that could still be developing, but definitely have to always be prepared for some real surprises.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the reason we started this podcast maybe 2 months ago, is because of the pace of news in the Trump administration. Like I was, telling you before, like it's so difficult for. I mean, I do this for a living. I follow the immigration news as part of my job. It is your entire job, right? And it's for immigration attorneys, it's a small part of their job to pay attention to what's going on, but it impacts their clients and their overall client strategy immensely. And trying to cut through the noise and understand like what is a signal for something that's going to have real consequences for immigration practitioners in the future versus what is just sort of like political theater is something that we do our best with in this podcast. So that's what we'll do today. Like I said, it's still a relatively new format that we're working with here, but the goal is to just in the next 30 minutes or so do a full breakdown of the most important developments that happened in the news this week, and a lot of that are going to be continuations of stories that have been happening for the last 6 months throughout the Trump administration. So some we might just hit on quickly and just recap what the headline is, and then others, Andrew, especially with your original reporting, we might dive into a bit deeper and see if there's something that we can share with the immigration practitioners listening that they haven't heard before. And then at the end, my favorite part of doing this podcast, and sometimes we have attorneys on, sometimes we have folks from think tanks on, is Andrew to ask you about maybe a new trend or a story that you're tracking, but it's still sort of maybe under the radar. Maybe you've written about it, but it just hasn't gotten a lot of that traction yet, but it's going to be consequential in the coming weeks or months. Because we've had a few of those thus far in the podcast that have turned out to be have had a Notre Dame effect. We had Gil Guerra from the Niskanen Center on
Mm.
back in June, and I asked him the same question, and he mentioned, "Hey, we were talking about Rubio's statement on additional scrutiny for F-1 students from China who have associations with the Chinese Communist Party." He says, "Watch for that to be, sort of go away once Trump has movement on his trade deal with China." And like lo and behold, over the July 4th weekend or something like that, Trump tweeted or truthed that he had a call with Xi and that like they're gonna back off on F1 students from China. So it's little things like that you have to keep an eye out for. Um,
Definitely.
cool. Well, Andrew, ready to jump into the headlines?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Well, we're going to start, and I'll share my screen for those who are watching, and for those who are listening, you can go over to YouTube and watch, or we'll just orate some of this for you. But I'm sharing now an article that Andrew published earlier this week on Bloomberg Law about the Fourth Circuit Court pausing the axing of temporary protections for Afghans in the U.S. Andrew, do you want to explain what happened in this development?
Yeah, so this this suit concerned a couple TPS terminations for Afghanistan and Cameroon, and your listeners are probably familiar with how TPS works. It's these it's temporary, of course, as Christy Nome loves to say, protections for 18 months at a time. And this program saw pretty significant growth under Biden, and one of the major immigration stories under Trump has been um, this kind of constant ongoing attack on uh, temporary relief, humanitarian type programs for immigrants, whether you're talking about TPS, parole, um, shutting down refugee resettlement. But I believe we're on seven TPS terminations now. This suit is challenging terminations for Afghanistan and Cameroon, and I guess the week before this order from the Fourth Circuit, a district judge in Maryland ruled against a DHS motion to toss this lawsuit that's aiming to keep protections in place, but he found that the plaintiffs, CASA, immigration group CASA, hadn't made a strong enough case to basically block them from terminating the protections for now. So the case would be ongoing, but DHS could go ahead and start revoking the TPS terminations starting this Monday for it's something like close to 12,000 Afghans in the U.S. we're talking about, and then very next week there was an emergency appeal at the Fourth Circuit, and they went ahead and paused the TPS revocations for a week, so until the 21st of this month. And now there's more briefing going on in this case, but we should see some further developments pretty soon. I think it's interesting, that on the TPS front, a couple days later in California, there was a hearing at the Ninth Circuit um, on a case that's aiming to that's challenging a TPS termination for Venezuela, and a big part of the oral arguments over there was basically like how should the court treat this track record of fairly inflammatory comments by Trump, Kristi Noem, others on immigrants from Venezuela for one, but this racial animus and equal protection issue has come up in other suits like this one with Afghans. Um, so I think it's gonna be interesting to see how different courts at the district and appellate level definitely eventually will go to the Supreme Court. How they treat this issue of equal protection and racial animus as a motivating factor in the terminations.
This one in particular has been, I think you cited seven, right, terminations for different TPS programs. It's been super difficult for me to follow, I think for a lot of folks to follow, because one, the administration, like it seems like every other week has a new announcement, right? Everyone knows that like any temporary protected program is probably on the chopping block, but the administration is like being very calculated about seemingly calculated when they announce these terminations, and then each one is being sort of ping-ponged back and forth in court. How are you tracking all of them? Do you have like a source, a group that you follow, or do you have like a spreadsheet with what's happening in every different court? How are you keeping track of all of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own spreadsheet of just the active court cases. I think there's like four just addressing the Venezuela and Haiti TPS designations, which were the first ones that they they went after the Biden extensions for those countries. Um, the National Immigration Forum has actually been a great resource covering the TPS issue. They have a great breakdown on their website of both the upcoming deadlines as well as the I guess estimated populations that are currently covered. Um, yeah, I've really uh, gotta monitor the Federal Register, but it's for these terminations that could come out any week because what
Right.
we've seen, and this has been an issue in some of the unfolding litigation. This administration, for whatever reason, there's a process in the statute for assessing whether the protection should be extended, renewed, or if they should be terminated after the 18 months. Um, and in some cases, we've seen them hit a deadline, um, and then there's no announcement for weeks on what their plans are, and you can uh, get an idea if you're an attorney, I guess, based on maybe what they're doing with work permit renewals, for example. But we've seen at least one case, I believe it was South Sudan, where um, there was no decision issued in time, so that one just kind of it automatically rolled over for 6 months. But yeah, the communication, the transparency, just on the decisions, not even like getting into the process behind them, um, but the actual how they're actually handling these designations from this administration. That has been great. Um, I guess based on what we've seen so far, it seems safe to assume that we're going to see um, more terminations going forward this year, and of course more lawsuits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, still on the court front, and I should have mentioned at the beginning that we'll go through the headlines of what happened sort of in litigation and in the courts in the immigration world to start, and then we'll take a look at some of the minor developments in Congress, and then we'll look at the agencies. But Andrew, another one of your articles, I'm sort of more interested in the broader saga here, but you wrote about how DOJ settled hiring bias claim with an H-2A farm labor contractor. So the sort of H-2A undocumented agricultural and seasonal worker debates has really heated up in the last like 4 weeks, and there's a lot of news coverage around it, especially sort of the inside jockeying and politicking going on inside of the Trump administration around what to do about both enforcement for farms, agricultural businesses, meatpacking plants, seasonal businesses who are hiring undocumented workers. But obviously, as a part of that, there's a program that exists that for within the legal immigration system that fills exactly this need that doesn't work very well, and there's a lot of contention in the H-2A and H-2B programs as well. So first, what was happening in this story, and I guess second, what do you think? How do you think it fits in the broader debate going on here?
Yeah, well, this one kind of it caught my eye. It stood out because this initiative that DOJ has launched or revived under Trump 2.0. It's they call it the Protecting U.S. Workers Initiative, and it's at this DOJ office that has traditionally um, investigated and enforced discrimination against uh, immigrant workers.
Right.
The it's basically supposed to make sure that employers are not discriminating on the basis of like citizenship or national origin, which is prohibited under INA. Typically, they're going after yeah, and in the past they're going after companies for at least when it comes to these sorts of bias claims against American workers. It involves the H-1B program, which of course is real big in the tech sector. But here we had a H-2A contractor, which is interesting because you don't hear about a lot of American farm workers there are some cases, but you don't hear necessarily about a lot of American workers being passed over for foreign farm workers
Yeah.
because it's an industry that struggles to hire so much. It's fairly not a huge settlement figure. It's like $25,000 in civil penalties, but it was notable to me because this is the second settlement that this initiative has announced, and I guess we'll see how many more they rack up. But I do think it's worth noting that under the Biden administration, you saw some um, pretty huge settlement numbers with big tech firms like Meta and Apple involving their sponsorship of foreign workers on H-1Bs. So does this administration ever like approach the scope of those settlements um, in in similar claims they're putting out? We'll have to see how it unfolds.
Well, that's a good segue into the other story of yours that you wrote this week that I wanted to touch on, and I'll share my screen here. And again, for folks who are listening, the links to all the articles that we're talking about today will be in the show notes. So if you're interested, you can go and click in there in the description on Spotify or YouTube and read these. Um, tell us about this story, Andrew. DOJ can probe Walmart Inc. For workplace immigration violations. What stuck out to me just when I read the headline is like Walmart and immigration violations, and I don't know if Walmart's the number one or number two biggest employer. It's them or Amazon in the country. But one of the things that has stuck out to me in the last 6 months, and you just mentioned it, is that for the most part, like the big American companies have seemed to be, other than maybe like Home Depot and a few others, have seemed to be on the sidelines of the Trump administration's massive expansion of immigration enforcement. So what happened here, and sort of what signals maybe is it telling us?
Yeah, so this one it's a chapter in this like broader story that involves a number of federal regulators like DOL, SEC, NLRB, um, where companies like Walmart, like SpaceX, they've brought these legal challenges to enforcement actions by these regulatory bodies, basically saying these internal adjudicatory systems, they're called administrative law judges, or ALJs. They've made the case like, hey, you can't enforce this violation. Here was ICE found like thousands of like basically amounted to like record keeping
Right.
issues under INA, but it's like, hey, you can't enforce this because the ALJ system is unconstitutional. Um, and SpaceX actually made that argument and successfully blocked a some DOJ proceedings involving hiring bias under INA against refugees and asylees, asylum seekers. In this case, there wasn't like a discrimination issue, but pretty interesting for folks who are like really big nerds about ALJs and these regulatory issues that you have a appeals court basically saying like, no, these protections for the internal agency judges, they're constitutional. We're going to kick this back to the district court here. So I guess we'll have to see if Walmart asks for a rehearing or escalates to the Supreme Court, but DOJ I guess could launch these proceedings again, but it's it's significant. The ALJ issue, it's like separate from like traditional, immigration law from issues under INA, but it's pretty important when you're talking about these about the powers of enforcement bodies that actually like uh, carry out and enforce statutes like the INA.
Yeah. One more story on the courts. This is from NPR. I'll share my screen here. But this is just sort of an update on their reporting, and I'm sure you've been, following this as well, Andrew, on the number of immigration judges that have been fired since the Trump administration came into office back in January. By their count, there's over 50 immigration judges that they believe have been fired in the first 6 months, and I think like another dozen in the last week, received their notification that they were being let go. Um, Andrew, is this Yeah, again, my understanding is, I think it's outlined in this article. There's only about like 700 or 800 federal immigration judges in the country, right? So if 50 are let go, and I assume there's some process for backfilling those judges, but that they're just going to take time. What do you think this does to um, court adjudications of immigration cases, which we already know there's an insurmountable backlog in the first place?
Yeah, so this was an issue that came up early on in the administration. I believe in January, early February, there was like an initial round of firings of recently hired immigration judges, and the question I heard from several folks at the time was like, well, how is this helping the sort of enforcement and deportation agenda of this administration? Because we have a backlog of, I believe it's around 3 million asylum cases between the immigration courts and USCIS. And if you don't have the judges to actually um, hear, adjudicate these cases, um, you know, are you just putting more people in removal proceedings, but they're sitting in a backlog, not going anywhere because you don't have the judges or the staff to hear them. So are they undercutting their own agenda to some extent? At the same time, though, we know that the administration is making moves to expand use of expedited removal, for example. So certain immigrants who've been here, I think the rule is generally like under 2 years, um, you can be deported much more quickly without access to the full review process in the immigration courts. Then there's been reporting as well on DOJ. These are not independent courts; they are under the Justice Department. There's been reporting on um, Trump officials leaning on judges to clear out cases more quickly. So I guess that's the big question here is like they're firing more judges for whatever reason. Do they plan to replace them with uh, new Trump picks? Do they plan to address this case backlog and in some other way? But it would like appear, at least on its face, that it doesn't help you. Um, work through all the pending asylum cases, uh, removal cases any more quickly.
Yeah, contradiction is a theme of this administration in many ways, but especially in its immigration policy. We've seen a lot of contradictions in sort of what it says and what it's doing on the back end, in both positive and negative ways. Um, okay, quickly, I'll just recap sort of two stories from Congress. Not to be dismissive, but we don't have to spend a ton of time on it because unfortunately, I don't. And you're free to disagree, Andrew, but I don't see there being a ton of significance in what's going on the immigration front in Congress right now. But Maria Salazar, Representative Maria Salazar, Republican from Florida, introduced, I believe it's really a reintroduction of the Dignity Act or some form of it earlier this week. This is the National Immigration Forum's really great summary of what the bill includes. It's written by Christian Penachet Paul, and we'll link it in the show notes as well. But there's a ton of stuff in here. There's pathway to legal status for undocumented immigrants. There's pathway to citizenship for dreamers. There's additional border funding. And it's at the very bottom, but my favorite wish list item that's in here that would be great if it happened. I don't think it ever will. Is an immigration agency coordinator to basically like oversee and coordinate Department of Labor, USCIS, and some of the other immigration agencies. But there's a lot in here. It's been met with uh, a lot of fire from some of the more MAGA adjacent Republicans, and at the same time, and this is from Michelle Hackman at the Wall Street Journal. She's reporting that inside on the Hill and in Congress, there's a lot of conversations going on now that the reconciliation has passed. Around what the next step in immigration is, and there's a lot of infighting going on between Jim Jordan, Maria Salazar, and sort of the different initiatives that they have. But at the moment, one of the big issues, and Andrew, you touched on it a minute ago, is Republicans, pushing specifically to address this issue with undocumented agricultural workers, and just creating or having a second look at the immigration system for the agricultural industry, in particular, because that seems to be the real hot button issue of the summer. So, anything I missed there, Andrew? Anything that's happening in Congress around immigration that you think is maybe more significant than I'm giving it credit for?
No, I mean, I think this bill, it's a pretty serious bipartisan effort. Will be interesting to see. I mean, Maria Salazar, made a direct appeal to President Trump to get involved here and pass reform legislation. So, is there some interest from the administration? We'll see, but it's it. We always hear from Republicans in Congress, well, we can't talk about reform or any kind of legalization effort, um, pass any immigration legislation until the border is addressed. Well, border crossings have like
Yeah.
plummeted under this administration. So like, what's the excuse now for not like actually having a conversation about the Dignity Act or some other kind of bipartisan effort? Does that guarantee that this will get like real serious treatment? Including from GOP leaders, I guess remains to be seen.
Yeah, it feels like every year or two, right? There's a serious bipartisan effort to actually, like you mentioned, put serious solutions forward, to fix a lot of the issues in the immigration system. And I think, again, not to be cynical, but for the most part, the last, 15, 20, 25 years have shown us that even if, there's a lot of media buzz around it for a few weeks, something else takes over the news cycle and it sort of just sits in the sort of pending in the House for forever, until there's a new Congress. Anything I missed on what's going on in Congress on the immigration front? There wasn't a ton in the news that I was able to find, but I don't know if there's something else that you're covering.
No, I mean, you probably wanted to get into this, but the Senate did just confirm a new USCIS director this week.
Indeed, yeah. Let's talk about that next. I'll pull up your reporting on that again. Um, yeah, Joseph Edlow was confirmed by the Senate, um, sort of exactly when we expected him to be, mid-July.
Okay.
He'd been, and I didn't realize this until it was, I talked to some former USCIS folks who confirmed it, but it was also in a statement that Dick Durbin put out during the confirmation process that Edlow's been at USCIS as a senior advisor, since day one of the Trump administration, involved in operations there. Um, what's your reporting, been on Edlow thus far in the first 6 months of the Trump administration, Andrew? And do you think that anything, accelerates now in terms of the Trump administration's priorities for USCIS now that he's officially in the role of director?
Yeah, I guess that's the question. I mean, just based on what he the priorities he laid out in the confirmation process, don't think the like overall direction is going to change. I mean, he talked about USCIS being, in his view, an enforcement agency at its core. Well, that they've been making moves in that direction. Um, I think the one thing that really jumped out, and a lot of attorneys on place like LinkedIn have zeroed in on this. His comments about optional practical training and basically ending. I mean, if you're just taking his comments at face value, ending postgraduate employment authorization for F-1 students, that would be pretty huge. I mean, it seems like little hard to game out like how that would affect employers here and the H-1B talent pipeline moving forward. But what that looks like if they go through the notice and comment rulemaking process soon with some kind of OPT reg. I think that's one to watch for sure.
It's something we're keeping a really close eye on with our data at Lawfully. Like, as you know, we're able to track in real time USCIS adjudications, including for I-765s broken down by certain case types. And, sometimes before the administration announces anything or before something gets leaked to a reporter like you or another reporter about a policy shift, you can start to see the changes in adjudication trends outside of seasonal norms. So that's something we're keeping a very, very close eye on. And we're trying to always keep our ear open to any immigration attorneys or university officials or reporters who, hear of a one-off case about something, because that enables us to look at our data and zoom into specific trends, specific keywords in more depth. Um, Andrew, I want to be cognizant of time here, so I'm just going to quickly breeze through the last few stories on the docket, and then I'll give you the chance to talk about the trend or story you think that's flying under the radar here. Real quick, this is from Inside Higher Ed. It's actually reporting that I contributed to um, on the drop in F-1 visa student issuances in May. So this is from Ashley Mo-Reader. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, your last name, Ashley. But yeah, I was looking at the State Department data that they release monthly. I looked at April's and I wanted to see if May and June's were out and see if F-1 and J-1 visa issuances were down as a result of the 20 plus day pause that took place and new visa appointments being able to be scheduled. That didn't take place till May 27th. The pause didn't start until around May 27th, supposedly, based on the original reporting from Politico on it. But there was still a 22% year over year drop, 12,000 fewer F-1 visas issued in May of this year compared to May of last year, and then 7,000 fewer J-1 visas. It's very likely that the decrease is going to continue throughout June and July because of the pause, because of the new social media vetting protocols. But it's something we'll be keeping a really close eye on. And Andrew, if you have any comments on any of these stories, just interrupt me. Otherwise, I'm just going to sort of breeze through them.
Great.
And then the last one I wanted to that I just popped up on my radar today was ProPublica, and this is something that we've sort of heard, inklings of for a while here. But ProPublica reported that the IRS is building a vast system to share millions of taxpayers' data with ICE, which I think since the beginning of the Trump administration, this has been an idea that's been floated and something that's been happening behind the scenes, the interagency coordination, not just between the immigration and the enforcement agencies, but also now the IRS to get a lot more information on immigrants to the enforcement agencies.
Yeah, and that one, I mean, great reporting by ProPublica, but it's part of this larger overall effort, like you said, to kind of suck up all this data across agencies. ICE is getting data like Medicaid data and requesting records from HUD as well. So it's almost like any agency you could think of with records on patients, taxpayers, anyone using kind of public benefits. It seems like it's fair game for the enforcement agenda.
And famously, earlier this year, that data sharing resulted in thousands of SEVIS terminations for F-1 students, right? And some of that got leaked in some litigation that took place around that issue, around the coordination between HSI and some of the other government organizations on how they sort of identified those names. So, something like this, it's something we need to keep a close eye on. Last one, and this is more of just like a commentary, something that a couple of attorneys brought to our attention during our Immigration Insiders meeting yesterday. But an attorney named Samir Kedekar posted about this, where he had a client who was a H-1B holder who was laid off or left their job, and the employer withdrew the H-1B for them. And although this individual is supposed to be in their grace period, the client got a notice to appear at NTA, in immigration court. So I'll link to Samir's post, so anyone who's listening can read it. But Andrew, I don't know if this is something that you've heard anything more about. It's a trend that we're going to see if we can quantify how the scale of it in our data, and we'll share anything we find if we do. But yeah, any reaction to this one?
Yeah, shout out to Samir. I've quoted him a couple times, I think. Not about this issue, but it's something in the last week that I've been hearing more and more about. Not just NTAs, but notices to appear being issued to H-1B workers in this grace period who, now they got to find not only a new employer sponsor, but probably got to find an attorney to help them deal with this notice to appear in the immigration courts. I guess I would want to plug. I've got a story coming soon on this sort of um, enforcement shift at USCIS. This new emphasis on not just its traditional role as a benefits and adjudication agency, but really this big recent emphasis under Trump 2.0 on vetting and enforcement, and covers some trends we're seeing, like arrest at field offices, as well as this NTA issue, and how the agency is kind of like kickstarting the
Right.
removal process for a lot of folks now.
And they're now talking about it a lot more on social media too, in one-off cases. Um, all right. Do you want to do the under the radar trend, or do you have to run? It's okay. We can cut it short if you got to get out of here.
Um, yeah, I mean, I these might be issues that that listeners are paying attention to already, but I'm going to be following, like, been a little bit of reporting on this new Office of Immigration Policy at DOL. What does its role actually look like? I know they're trying to consolidate a lot of work on temporary and employment-based visas. But what does that work? What form does it take moving forward here? What kind of reforms to processing, or whatever else happens there, to streamline things for users? And then looking too at, there's tons of money for enforcement and this big reconciliation package that just passed. A lot of that going to building new immigrant detention facilities, but ICE is getting a lot of new funds here. So what does that look like? Not just for arrest, deportations, but do they like really ramp up the work site enforcement and all that activity now? How does that funding infusion play out in the legal immigration world?
Yeah, on that one, I'm just curious if you have a quick minute, because I'm not sure. Is does how much of the funding has like mandates from Congress of X number of dollars needs to go to this, and how sort of specific are those mandates versus the leaders at ICE have some say over where and how to use the money.
Yeah, I mean, I know I kind of just know the top line numbers like 40, 45 billion.
Yeah.
I think for detention centers, but gonna have to do some digging into like how the rest is actually spent now. There's a lot for hiring,
Yeah.
for example. Could some be used for contractors to augment the operations? I guess I'm gonna have to do more reporting myself on those questions.
Yeah, well, I don't think they know either, right? So it's like it's gonna be a slow trickle. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join me and do this. This is really fun. It's a treat to have an actual immigration reporter join us to recap the news and share some of the great reporting that you did. Before we go, tell everyone where they can follow your work, and then is there anything else you want to plug? Anything you're working on that you want to let the folks know about?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter or X, Blue Sky, but most of my updates folks can find on my LinkedIn feed. Um, and yeah, look out for our coverage of USCIS. I'm always interested to hear directly from attorneys and folks working in this space on how they're seeing um, you know, new policies or practices with issues like NTAs pop up. So get in touch.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And the final plug I'll leave the audience with, we're doing our Immigration Insiders meeting next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern with Michael Valverde. He is former Associate Director of Field Operations at USCIS until recently, so he oversaw all 89 field offices. We'll be looking at a bunch of our data, Lawfully's exclusive real-time case processing data on NOIDs for H-1Bs, EB-2 NIWs, looking at I-485 employment-based processing trends, and a lot more. Maybe the NTA stuff, if we're able to pull that together in time. I'm not sure, but hope to see you there for that one. I'll put the links in the description. Also, I'll put the links for all of Andrew's stuff there as well. So, Andrew, with that, thanks so much for joining today, man. I appreciate it.
All right, good to be here.